I'm just going to say it. I think a lot of it is a lot of these game developers. And again, I don't know this for a fact. I'll just speak for me, but I don't like a lot of these kinds of people that push back on the art, right? I find them simple-minded. I find them unevolved. I find them frustratingly basic. So this guy over in the Discord, Peter Ryan, sent me this video. He said, I think you should watch this Asmongold video. Whether you choose to respond, I think it might give you a better opinion of the guy. And this is the first time I've ever watched an entire video. I usually see clips of him on Twitter. And then I saw a couple of things when there was a bit of a brouhaha a couple of weeks ago, but I don't, it seems very well-spoken, good on the fly. I don't agree with, well, it's not that I don't agree, but I take issue with some of his points. This is basically about video game characters, specifically in Witcher 4 and in Intergalactic. Witcher 4, just briefly, I'll say the same thing I said about Dragon Age. I'm not a big Witcher guy. Assuming you can get past, some people seem to be able to, some people don't, that the lore does or doesn't allow for there to be women Witchers, how much that bothers you. The character themselves, though, I think if you're comfortable with it no longer being, what's his name, Gerard, whatever the fuck his name is, and there's no lore issues, at that point you're just arguing over if the girl is hot enough or not, right? So I'll stick it with that. If you're upset for other reasons about that, it's out of my wheelhouse. I don't know much about it. But I will speak to Intergalactic because none of us pretty much know anything about it except what we saw at the Game Awards with the trailer. That really kind of gets to the heart of this to me, which is there's kind of three things that jump out. One is sort of the artistic intent and creation of video games. The second one is the business of video games. And the third one is kind of a hypocritical thing that I hear certain people saying in this argument. So why don't we start with the art part first. So Asmongold here says, he's like, look, man, you're making these games and men are your primary audience, at least for this kind of space intergalactic game, and most men are straight. And in that, basically give us what we want. Why would we want what you're serving us? We don't want normal characters. We don't want ugly characters. Fulfill our fantasies. I mean, he's saying it more elegant and much more articulate than that, but that's the gist of it, right? And so here's my thought and here's my response to that, which is, I think, for the longest time, we have had the media telling game creators, you're artists. This is the next big medium. You're as important as filmmakers. Here's your award, blah, blah, blah. Whether you believe that or not, it's usually just PR, but everything's PR. But I do think you've gotten to a point, certainly with a studio like Sony that's put a lot of energy and money and promotion and have had a lot of success with treating video games as more of a sort of cinematic art form that happens to be a game, where a lot of these creators are now sort of doing what the guys in Hollywood do, which is trying to tell more grounded stories, even though, yes, it's about a bounty hunter in space or about a monster fighter or whatever. The sense of these don't have to be just simple Spider-Man, Superman comic book stories. These things can be meaningful expressions of an art form. Again, whether you agree or not is irrelevant, but if you do look, and this will get into the business thing a little bit, but if you look at, like, this is just sort of Ranker looked at actresses that are, most people would agree are very, very attractive, but they've kind of, brought down their glam for certain roles, right? So here's Nicole Kidman, who clearly, if you saw this woman in a starring role of a sci-fi movie, you'd go, cool. If you saw this one, you would say, okay, well, this is interesting. Like, is this an indie space film about a sci-fi bounty hunter who is having existential crises while she's flying around, stopping bad guys? Like, it would be a different kind of film. Charlize Theron, come on, right? This was her in Monster. She won an Oscar for that. So I get the idea that you're going to get a lot of people who want to be serious creators in the industry and or just simply be seen as such, going, hey, we want to do that too. So I get it. I mean, even to the point that when we did God of War, now it's different, where one of the things I will agree with what Asmongold says in this video is, the majority of gamers of this kind of game, doesn't mean there weren't women that enjoyed God of War and all that stuff. Of course there were, but the majority of people who enjoy this kind of game are men. And so it doesn't bother them as much if your character is a male and he's a little bit more rough around the edges. We intentionally made Kratos in 2005. Here he is. We broke his nose, or at least we designed him as if his nose had been broken. Nobody's going to look at this guy at a face level and go, he's a GQ model. It's just that was the intent. But probably because most people playing it were men, they didn't really care all that much, right? But I get it. I get why you would want to do that as a creator if you want to ground your game a little bit more. So I do think there is kind of an unspoken truth about this, which is, and I'm just gonna say it. I think a lot of it is a lot of these game developers, and again, I don't know this for a fact. I'll just speak for me, but I don't like a lot of these kinds of people that push back on the art, right? I find them simple-minded. I find them unevolved. I find them frustratingly basic. And on the flip side, they see us as very similar, right? They go, you think you're smarter than everybody else, and you're brainwashed by the left and the progressive agenda, and you abuse your kids, and you're terrible, and blah, 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 blah. And so let's not pretend that one side is the only one with a dog in this fight. Both sides pretty much seem to disrespect the shit out of each other. And as a creator, at one time anyway, there is a real sense of, I am not going to give my blood, sweat, and tears for 4, 5, 6 years working with hundreds of people and simply be a short order cook for a bunch of fucking people I don't respect. Which is why I'm always just kind of like, look, man, if these kind of guys want their games, they should go make them themselves, or they should hire people, because there's plenty of conservative people out there, I assume, that can make video games. Just like Fox News did. Start a company, start a news division, start a video game division that totally is like, hey, we're going to go for the red state guys. Totally fine. Because I do think there's a massive disrespect. Now, I don't mean as people. Certainly, I don't know this guy, Asmongold, or anybody like him. My guess would be that if we were to meet in real life and sit down and eat lunch together, we disagree mightily over a lot of things, but I don't really disrespect him as a fellow human on the planet. I just think the way he thinks is very not appealing to me. And I imagine he would agree with the way I think, or think the same thing. But now here's what I'll say, though, where I think he's very correct, which is, end of the day, if you are an executive, like Neil Druckmann's a special case because he's built tons of success for Sony and PlayStation and whatever, but let's just assume he's not. Let's assume he's just some guy, or let's assume it's Dragon Age. If you're making a game for a studio above, say, $40-50 million, like anything under that, go to town. If the studio wants to fund art projects for sort of award cachet or a sense of PR, or just out of the goodness of their heart, I think they can, they should. And I'm glad some of them do. And we should all support those games if you like them, of course, where a studio steps up and says, we're going to let Kojima, Neil Druckmann, Cory Barlog, someone you've never heard of that we think has some real potential, run and totally make whatever you want within reason, because it is an art form. And sometimes, like in movies and TV, look, check this out, right? So if you look at the most mainstream television show is like that NCIS thing. I've never really watched it, but I know what it is. We all know what it is. Most of the people in the cast are real pretty people, right? You're not going to put people in the cast that are not, they may not all be fashion plates, but they're good looking, above average looking people that are aspirational characters, and they're fun to look at and fun to escape into worlds with. And this is probably a relatively expensive show to produce, not because it's effects laden, but just because a lot of stars and big shot directors and expensive sets. But then if you look at this, I think it was called Shrill. We watched this with the Abby. I think what is her? She's on. I forget what her name is. She was on SNL. But it was very, very good. Got 2 or 3 seasons. And, it's just it's very slice of life. It's very inexpensive to make. And clearly, even though she was great in this show, it is clearly not a traditional narrative. It is not a traditional leading lady in a story. And I think that's great. But if they would have said, we want the budget for NCIS to make Shrill, I think people would say you're out of your fucking mind, and they would be right. And so I do think, assuming Neil wasn't Neil, and he hadn't kind of earned a shot, just like Christopher Nolan, told Warner Brothers, like, yeah, I'll make you another Batman, but I'm going to make my passion project Inception afterwards, even though and it did well, but even though it's a brand new IP, no one's ever heard of it. And Warner Brothers is like, okay, so that's kind of the Neil Druckmann scenario, I assume. But if he wasn't Neil Druckmann, I wouldn't have a problem if Sony stepped in and said, guys, you're spending what, 2, 3, 4, depending on who you listen to, $100 million. I get that you want to ground your character, what is called Intergalactic, not Interstellar, Intergalactic. You want to ground her and stuff and give her more of a interesting take, and she's not just like characters we've seen multiple times. I get it, but we're spending a lot of money, and you're going to have to find a way to express what you want to express, but not rock the boat to the degree that a character that looks like this would probably rock the boat. And I hate to say it, and I don't have a problem with this character. I'm very much looking forward to this game. I think it looks really, really cool. But if I was an executive and it wasn't Druckmann, I would be like, are you out of your fucking mind? Not to say this character's face, but you're going for, she's not a traditional action heroine. She just isn't. And you could say, well, what about Charlize Theron, however you say her fucking name, in Mad Max, right? But it's like, we already know her. We know her as beautiful, Charlize Theron or Charlize Theron. We know her as that character, as that human. And, it goes down easier, is what I would say, frankly. But, I don't know. I think there is absolutely a sense of, I get what these guys are saying when they say they don't like the intergalactic character. But I think there is a pushback on the part of game creators and certain kinds of people, though, because it's like, you know what? You guys are just so fucking stupid, and we don't respect you. And you can't ever open your minds to anything. Everything's got to be fat material. And I'm not saying that's the case for everyone or all of them or the majority of them, but it certainly seems to be the case for a very vocal minority of them. And I'm not saying this guy, I'm not saying Asmongold's that. I mean, like I said, he's articulate. What he says makes some sense. But I'm just saying that it may be pushing back there. Like if you were to tell me, I don't know, I don't think I'd have a problem with it. If I was trying to make a big budget game, I'd go, yeah, I gotta play for everybody who comes to hear the music. It's not just my own personal vision. But if I was making something really cheap, yeah, get the fuck out of my way. Let me do what I want. But that's kind of not the case. The hypocrisy part bothers me a little bit, just because I guess Asmongold said this.
I feel like, how many points on a graph do you need to be able to draw a line? I think that it's very obvious that these things clearly do matter a lot to players, and this is not enough of a small minority for it not to be taken seriously. And
I mean, he does say a lot of things in this video like that, where he's just sort of assuming because he believes something without offering any statistics that it just is. Like, and again, he may be right, but I don't really think he's offering up. Like he says, oh, well, show me a video that got less than 50% reveal trailer that ended up being a hit.
And I also hear the narrative that these are things that are only held by a small minority of people. Only a small minority of people actually think this. And I have a challenge to everybody who thinks that. If you think that all of the people that dislike whatever game it is, whether I think the Intergalactic game is probably the one that's most worst received, I want you to find me a reveal trailer of a video game that has a less than 50% like ratio that turned out to be a success for a studio. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I can cite games with really popular reveal trailers that went on to be great games, and they weren't successful, but they have a great reveal. For example, here's Returnal. So if his theory is right, you would assume that the reveal trailer for Returnal, you would end up with something that would be a big hit, because the upvotes for this reveal trailer were hugely popular and the downvotes were minuscule comparatively speaking. So how a reveal trailer performs in terms of the initial audience reaction doesn't seem to be a slam dunk when it comes to how the game will ultimately do on the market. But if you listen to Asmongold, he just states it as fact. And again, maybe there is a connection there, but him just stating it is not enough, at least for me, to go, oh, okay, yeah, you've proven that point. So there are things in this video he makes where it does feel to me like he's just making statements as if they are just because he says them. Like he said something in here where he says, it is very much the truth. When he just says it's very much the truth, it's like just because you say it.
Vision of the game and of the story. I think that's just how it is. And
I'm thrilled you think that's just how it is, but
so
here's what he's talking
that's
about.
The case with everybody. I'm sure there's going to be people that can't understand abstract ideas, so they have to comment and say that's not what I think. Well, that's nice. But
He's basically saying that some gamers will say, I don't need my female characters in games to be attractive, and the gender of the character doesn't matter.
I think that in a general sense it is. I think gender is a massive barrier to relatability. So if you take a character that people relate to and they can see themselves in, and you change its gender, you do fuck with a lot of people's vision of the game and of...
So he's saying two things there. If he's talking about The Witcher, I can appreciate, like I said, even though, like I said, I mean, if you're expecting the original character as The Witcher, then I get what he's saying about that here. But I got the sense most people were accepting of the fact that there was going to be a new Witcher. But regardless, in general, though, the idea that gender is a massive barrier to relatability, I would just say that that's one of those weird things where it's like people like me think people like you who feel that way are quite simple and not as worthy of respect when it comes to this issue. That's a terrible thing to admit. But it's true, and you know it's true, and you guys feel the same way about me. It doesn't mean you hate me or I hate this guy. That's not the case. It just means that, these are pretty deep battle lines or ideological lines, right? But the other thing is this idea that relatability, like, okay, let's assume he's right and that gender is a massive problem if you don't relate to the gender. And I'm not saying he said this. I don't watch this guy's stuff, so maybe he's not saying this, but there's a lot of people on that side of the argument that are like, diversity doesn't matter. Whenever you get people pushing for diversity, people who don't like it are like, I never had to see myself in video games. Like, well, yeah, because you're a white dude. You were always represented in video games. But on one hand, it's weird to me that you've got diversity doesn't matter. Seeing yourself in a game doesn't matter. But at the same time, if you don't see your gender represented, it's a massive barrier to immersion. So, it was a little weird. The other thing he says, and I did think this was interesting, and I don't think he's wrong, because I do look at the character in Intergalactic, and I go, yeah, that character is probably designed with a conscious effort to make a statement of, we're going to ground this. We're going to feed you your vegetables. I get it. The term I heard that I just absolutely loved, about Concord was it was aggressive to the male gaze. And I not gaze, but gaze, Gaze. And I think with this character here, there's a similarity there. It's like it's good for you, just fucking eat it. I totally get that. And what Asmon said somewhere in this video was he says, hey, it's not just the character. I bet you're going to see that peppered throughout the game, that attitude of we know what's better for you. Just listen. And I think that is an accurate, and again, I haven't played this game, I'm saying, but I do think that is an accurate mentality that is very clear in a number of games like this or art like this. And in that, I do absolutely understand the pushback on the side of the other side, because I'm just like, leave me the fuck alone. It's like, I think people, if they want hot chicks and hot guys in games, they should get them. But I don't think, again, it goes back to the business, right? Here's what I would say. If I'm a CEO, and I know people would push back on this, but if I'm a fucking CEO at a video game company, I would say, look, if you're spending over $50 million, your character's got to work with the character creator. I don't care. You want to make your character not have any hair, it's a woman or a man, it's a woman with really small breasts. If you want to make a fucking, penthouse pinup model, whatever the fuck you want to make. As long as the story works, and to be, to Dragon Age's credit, you get to do that in that game. But and hell, at that point, it's almost like have a third party do it, not for every game, but it's like have Unreal 5 have just the most robust character creator ever made. and have people sell fucking custom. I want to be Taylor Swift in every game I play. That's, a big budget game. So my Interstellar Bounty Hunter looks like Taylor Swift. Yours can look like The Rock. I don't give a shit. Or Bruce Lee or Larry David. I don't care. I think when you're spending that kind of money, and that's where movies are going anyway. I know it sounds crazy, but that's where movies are going anyway. Roll your own, basically, with AI and all that shit. Video games can already be there. There's no reason not to just jump to the head of the line for once when it comes to the mediums. But, and you're like, but that's not the director's vision. Yeah, the director can make his vision for $40 million or $50 million, depending on the studio. But when you're dealing with this kind of money, the director can, do what you can to get your vision in there. We need that. We need it to have some heart and soul. These aren't cookie cutter operations, or they shouldn't be. But at the same time, you're making a product for a lot of people. So that's my take on it. As for this character, I think she's fine. I got nothing against her. She's not my cup of tea, but frankly, I'm not playing the game. If she's a good character, I'll like her. I don't need her to be anything other than, I'm down with Naughty Dog making an art project, even though it looks like an action game and very commercial. I don't need her to be anything other than what I've seen so far. She looks cool, but she's not my cup of tea, but that doesn't, I don't know. That's how I respond to it. Just like the woman in, if I had a choice between going out with her, not that I ever would, or her, not that I ever would, I'd choose her. But that doesn't mean I can't vibe with the story with a character like this. Anyway, that's my take, Peter Ryan, who wanted me to respond to this video. I didn't really go through it. I watched it, but that's how I responded. So I hope you're satisfied, you'll so-and-so. Be well, be safe. See you soon. Bye.